and a mother's crusade. Everyone remembers the story of little Matty Eapen, shaken to death by his British nanny. Now, 10 years later, the warning his mom wants every parent to hear, a GMA exclusive. Plus, are your kids struggling?
And more weather from Times Square in the next half hour. George?
Okay, Sam, thanks. We're going to go now to a story many of you probably remember. It made headlines around the world 10 years ago when British au pair Louise Woodward was convicted of killing the infant in her care, little Matty Eapen. It was a case that devastated a family. It dominated the news and for the first time spread awareness about this often deadly form of child abuse, shaken baby syndrome. It was the murder trial that took the small town of Newton, Massachusetts by storm.
Anything you want to say about what happened?
Captivating audiences on both sides of the Atlantic.
His eyes were half closed, and he wasn't breathing properly.
You just slam Matthew Eapen?
No.
19-year-old British au pair Louise Woodward found guilty of violently shaking 8-month-old Matthew Eapen and causing his death.
Guilty of murder in the second degree.
But days later, the judge shocked trial watchers by commuting the sentence down to manslaughter, releasing Woodward. But her trial had already brought shaken baby syndrome into the limelight. And 10 years later, Matthew's parents, Debbie and Sunil Eapen, are committed to making sure it stays there.
It gave us an area we can make a difference where we may not have otherwise chosen to do this.
The Matty Eapen Foundation was founded just 1 year after their son's death and is dedicated to education and the prevention of shaken baby syndrome. And of course, to the memory of little Matty.
I feel like a positive from this is to be able to say to our kids, look, when something goes really wrong, we are able to make a difference by trying to make something really right.
And joining me now for her first television interview is Matty's mother, Dr. Debbie Eapen, along with District Attorney Gerald Leone and Massachusetts Attorney General Martha Coakley, two of the lead prosecutors in the case when it made headlines 10 years ago. Good morning, to all of you. And Debbie, let me begin with you. I think 10 years ago, hardly anyone had heard about this syndrome. Now we have state laws across the country requiring people to be educated about it, and the prosecutions have gone from, what, 200 a year to about 1,000 a year. What's the most important thing for parents to know about all this?
I think it's actually been a very positive thing in that people do understand that shaking a baby is a violent form of child abuse, and the caregiver is usually frustrated and angry and takes it out on an infant. Having awareness of the dangers of shaking a baby is really going to make a difference for so many children across the world.
So that people just stop and think. But I was surprised to learn that 75% of the cases, according to one expert, are actually by the children's parents. And you know, you try to teach parents about this, try to teach caregivers about this. More often than not, is it a case of people not knowing what to do or simply getting caught up in an uncontrollable rage?
I think it's probably a combination. I think it's a lot about anger management, about understanding normal infant development, understanding that babies do cry for several hours a day, and learning how to cope with the frustration of being a caregiver.
Louise Woodward has always maintained her innocence, but do you have any doubt about what happened to your son?
I don't. It was a very straightforward medical case, clear injury, skull fracture, 2.5-inch skull fracture to the back of the head, retinal hemorrhaging, brain swelling, and no chance of life. Standard case. You know, the jury convicted Louise Woodward, but the judge, Judge Sobel, reduced her sentence and she was released from jail. He said that she was acting out of anxiety, nervousness, but not malice. Did that change your view at all?
No, from the very inception of this case, George, this case was about Matty Eapen and holding his killer, his abuser, responsible and accountable. And at the end of the trial, the verdict did just that. It allowed us to do two very important things, two significant things. One is to use the case in Matty's memory to heighten the awareness around shaking a child and child abuse. And the second, which was less obvious, was to contradict and counter the unfair public scrutiny that both Debbie and Sonny received as Matty's parents during the course of the trial.
You know, but since then, you know, it seems like medical opinion has reached a consensus that this really is a syndrome. Yet Martha, Dr. Patrick Barnes, who treated Matty, has actually changed his opinion about what happened.
Well, interestingly, Dr. Barnes stands alone in maintaining that opinion. And I think it's important to know where he comes from also. You know, he soon after this case developed a practice, a very lucrative practice in testifying for the defense. And so although Dr. Barnes is and was a respected witness in this case, his changing of opinion is really unconscionable, I think, and he is entitled to his opinion. He's not entitled to his own facts. And as he's voiced this opinion, no one has joined him in it. I think that's very telling.
Yet there is a fair amount of skepticism or resistance to the idea that caregivers, that parents are going to shake a baby to death. What is that about?
Of course, it's always the biggest problem in child abuse, George, that people don't expect or want to think that a caregiver or a family member would either sexually or physically abuse a child. And so our own natural resistance to think the world is safe or to think we know who the bad guy is comes into play here, as it did very much in this case. No one wanted to think that an 18-year-old woman, a visitor from England, could do this.
Louise Woodward has never apologized for this at all. Would it make any difference to you if she did?
I think on a human level, yes. But to me, it's really not about Louise. It's about Matthew. And Matthew should be with us today. And he should be celebrating the Red Sox and going trick-or-treating and being an 11-year-old boy. So to me, I focus on my family and my kids and kind of that loss of innocence we all live with now.
You still miss him?
Terribly.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can find out more about the Maddie Eapen Foundation at our website at abcnews.com. And when we come back, how you can help your kids get better grades. Maybe just need to have them sleep on it. Details when we return.